Thank you. So, good day, everybody. Welcome to the Borum Energy Solution, home scale wind turbines and towers, session number 10. It's already there. We probably have one or two more to go. We have an exciting agenda today. So, today we're going to talk about how to not rating the tower, but raising the tower and securing the tower. Okay. So, that's what we're going to cover. I also want to point out that over the next two sessions, we're going to talk about post sales opportunities and warranty. All right. But we will also talk about the difference for the NRR 1.4 compared to everything I've covered. And then we're going to cover the NRR Plus. Okay. So there's some nuances that needs to be accounted for in the installation process. So that's going to be the topic for the next two sessions. Okay, so a recall from the last sessions. Um, we installed and secured the blades on the turbine. The turbine was already on the tower. We secured the blade and we put the cone. We also assembled the vane and the boom, and we saw how to do that. We firmware assembled, installed, and tested the electrical box at the bottom of the tower here. And you remember it's on the pedestal. And finally, we covered the dump load. At this point, you got everything ready to go to raise the tower vertical for operation. Word of caution. So remember this time, we're going to raise the tower, with the turbine at the top of the tower. Soon as there's some wind on the turbine, the vanes, the big vane at the back, attached to the furnace system, the vane will bring the blades in the wind. That's their role. That's the role of the vane. Always bring the blades in the wind. By doing so, it will create some force at the top of the tower. Force that we did not have to deal with when we tested the tower. When we tested the tower, there was no turbine at the top. All right. So what does that do? Well, we have to be careful because depending on the wind direction, if the wind direction is perpendicular to, if you want to, or a certain degree from how the tower is on the ground, that wind with the turbine at the top will create a lateral force, right? Will try to move the tower. As you raise it, it will try to move it to the right in this case, or to the left. The towers with the guide wires are not, well, until the guide wires are connected and secured, are not made to support a great lateral force. As a result, we do not recommend raising the tower if the wind is greater than 10 kilometers per hour. Okay, so it's a safety factor, and even then, be aware of gust wind. Okay, so wind direction here, lateral force on the tower. Okay, so that's a word of caution. Okay, so here's how we are today. So just to call everybody, so you got the tower horizontal, you got the gin pole, you got a winch, which all can be substituted with a pickup truck or a tractor, something like that, right? And you got the couplers and you got the guide wires attached to the gin pole and the winch attached to the gin pole, all right, with the tilt base here. All right, there we go. So I got to go back to some of what we talked about to make sure that everything is okay. So you connect the guide wires. So here comes the three guide wires here through a pigtail, right? And you need one pigtail per guide wire. Okay. So you've done this a few sessions ago when you tested the tower. You may have removed the pigtails. We recommend to leave them there. But in case they will remove, you need to put them back on. If they're already there, you need to validate the torque on the wire clips, okay? Just in case. So be careful here. Those are the wire clips here. If you recall, there's three with the thimble here. So you want to validate that the torque is correct. All right. So I want to be very secure. Okay. So that's the guide wires here. Remember the gin pole, the base, and all that. All right. At this point in time, you want to connect to the winch. So you connect the winch to the anchor. You extend the winch cable and you connect it here on the guide wire. All right. So that's what it is. The guide wire is here, and you have the gin pole here, and you connect the winch here. All right. In order to make sure that the tower, when you start raising it, doesn't go lateral on you, well, you need some people to help you, at least one person on either side of the tower. Okay. And we showed you the last time, we call it the Vlad approach. So you have the guide wire here. This is on the left, on the right, right? And then what you do is you behind it, use your arm and you pull on it. So that way you put some good tension on the guide wire, and that will help prevent the tower to go lateral on you. Okay. Now, if there's too much slack here, you can also adjust it with the turnbuckle or with the wire clips, but that's a lot of work if you have to change the wire clips and adjust them accordingly. So the V or the Vlad method here is a good way to do that. You need a strong individual to do that with a pair of gloves. All right. The guide wires can really hurt your headlands. And here's what we recommend that I do all the time. The strongest individual that is helping you should be managing the guide wires upstream of the wind. So that's the wind we're coming from. So you want the strongest person to be able to hold that guide wire. Okay. And if you have more than one individual, I would put two there. And remember, you have three guide wires on either side. Okay. And then we raise the tower until about 70 degrees. It doesn't have to be, 70 degrees sharp, but in that range. And I'll show you why. So what happened is, so let's look at this curve. What we have is you have the tower. You have the guide wires attached to the gin pole through the pigtail that we saw earlier on. Okay. And obviously you have leftover guide wires here, right? All right. You have a winch and you have an anchor. All right. So what happened is as you would pull on this, then what happened is as this thing rotates towards vertical, then unfortunately you get more stress or forces on the X direction than the Y. And as a result of that, it becomes more and more difficult to raise the tower. Right? All right. So as I said here, not only that, but you have a very significant shear force or horizontal force on the gin pole and all that. So how do we correct that? How do we deal with this? Okay. Plus, it's getting harder and harder for the winch to be able to raise the tower because most of the force is in that direction. Okay, so what do we do? Well, first, at this point, when you get to certain degrees like that, 70 or so, well, first, you stop the winch. Second, remember you had some slack leftover guide wire cable. So you take the leftover guide wire cable for A and B, and you connect it to the anchor. All right, you connect it to the anchor. You stop the winch. You connect it to the anchor. And you do that through a thimble and wire clips, and we know how to do that by now. Once that's done, I recommend that you have a second person that was not involved with this to validate that the guy wires are secure on the anchor, right? The one has to slip, has to be secure. Okay, so at this point in time, what do we have? We have a tower that's around this angle, okay? And we have this part of the tower that is now secured to the anchor, okay? All right. Next up, you slowly release the winch cable. The tower at this point in time should stay in its current position because guy wire A and B are secured to the anchor. It's not supposed to move. If it moves, then you have to stop the winch and validate that the guy wires are connected securely to the anchor. If everything is okay and you've released the winch a little bit, then what you do, you disconnect the winch cable, which is this one, from the gin pole. Okay, you disconnect that. Very straightforward. Right, so you release the winch so there's some slack in it. The tower is not going to move because it's been held by A and B connected to the anchor to the gin pole. Secure. Okay, so you release the winch, put a bit of slack in the winch cable, and then you disconnect the winch cable from the gin pole. So once you've disconnected the winch from the gin pole, you connect it directly guy wire C. So now your tower is being held by two things, by A and B on the anchor and by the gin pole by the winch holding guy wire C. The tower at this point in time should not move either. If you engage the winch at this point in time, the tower will move up because you're at the top of the tower. So you're pulling on this, the rest of the tower will follow. As you move up, and you can see how this thing is slowly moving up, turning and as you're pulling on this, there'll be some slack in the connection of the guy A and B with the guy wire and the gin pole. There'll be some slack here. So from a safety perspective, on a regular basis, what you want to do is remove the slack. You can do that through the turnbuckles, tie them up to turnbuckles, or the wire clips, right? You loosen the wire clips on each of those cables, tight up the cable, and retort the wire clips. So it provides some safety because every time when you do that, you know that the tower is being held by both A and B through the anchor and C to the winch, which I should have said is also connected to the anchor or something else. So at this point in time, what do you do? So you keep going. It's an iterative process. And you go like this until you get to what looks like 90 degrees. By the way, I should say that the way the tower base is designed, you cannot exceed 90 degrees. It will stop. Okay. So at this point in time, when it appears to be 90 degrees, you stop. Pick stop on the winch. You disconnect A and B from the gin pole, and you take the gin pole out, and now you connect directly to the anchor. Right? So now you have a secure solution. The tower is held vertically by the winch, also connected to the anchor. The next thing is a bit of a mix of science and art. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that the first section of the tower, this one here, is vertical. And I'll use a new word in the next slide. I call it the verticality. Okay. Not sure if it's in dictionary, but it is here. So basically, you adjust. So remember now, you got this for the first section, you got this cable, but you also have two more, right? Because there's three guy cables, 120 degrees. So you adjust the three guy wires, connect to first coupler. So the tower is vertical in all directions. So you put on the level there, you go around, and it's an iterative process. All right. You adjust one, adjust the next one until you get very close to it. So it's an iterative. You can use it with, you can adjust with turnbuckles and wire clips. The key here is you want to adjust the first section of the tower. Make sure that it's vertical. Okay, remember the chin pole is no longer there. The winch is not moving. You put it in the stop position. Most winch will not release anything at this point in time. So once the first tower pole is vertical, then what you do is you go to the second section. And here's my new word, verticality or verticality. So you adjust the guy wires to the second coupler. So here, all right. Now this is where it becomes more an art because you can't, unless you're very tall, and nobody's that tall. Remember, the first section is 22 feet. And now you're looking at around 44. So this section here, you want to make sure it's vertical. So you're going to have to go to the bottom of the tower and look up as close as, put your head as close as you can to the tower pole and look up to get a sense of whether or not the second section is vertical or not. So like what I said, it's a bit of science and art at the same time. So this is where you adjust the three guy wires, okay? Again, turnbuckles, wire clips. And this is where you need some people to help you, at least one person on either side and the back. So they adjust the guy wire cables, and while you watch up and see how it shifts, okay, until it looks pretty vertical to you. Okay, and last but not least, so now you got the first section, second section, they're pretty vertical. Now you disconnect the winch. You feel secure because the first two sections are connected to the anchor here, connected to the other two anchors, nice and tight vertical. So now you disconnect the winch and you connect that guy wire to the anchor, right? And you continue and you adjust the three wires connected to the third coupler. Same thing, iterative process, turnbuckles, wire clips. I can tell from experience that this could be a bit frustrating because it's you adjust one and the other one moves a little bit. So it takes a little while to do that. Okay, so it's an iterative process. And once you've done all three of them, you've done the third one, you have to go back. Go back and look at the verticality of each tower section. Okay, and again, you can do that by adding or reducing tension in the guide wires. There in the assembly manual, we provide the tension, minimum tension in each guide wire. So this is where at this point in time, you need to make sure that the tension is up to spec in each guide wire.